this one is, a little different from some of the other cases we've looked at where there is, quite a big possibility of actually human involvement in the disappearance.
I think it was totally abduction.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a lot of our other cases, there's always a big chance of something in the wild happening to the person. But I guess before we go into our theories, do you want to recap what some of the official theories were?
Yeah, so I mean, we have the first official theory that is written down was after they discovered the skull.
Yeah.
I'll go back a little bit further. I think everyone seemed to get on board that she was abducted.
Yep.
I think that's what everyone thought. And maybe there's a few people that thought maybe she wandered off and got lost, but I think the ongoing thing was she was abducted.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, they wouldn't have gone through such a massive effort post-search.
Yeah.
And that's simply because, again, you're in the desert. It's not raining. Not a lot changes.
Yeah.
They do a wide-scale search immediately after she goes missing, can't find her.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty crazy. So then you get to the next official theory where they find the skull a couple years later. And the first official theory is she wandered and got buried in sand, which I just say is bull because you had the bloodhound following the footprints. Does she get completely buried in sand within one day?
Mm-hmm.
It's a matter of, I don't know. I just feel like they would have found something, especially the dogs then.
Yeah.
They would have smelled that.
Well, the one thing, while I agree, I think abduction is the most likely scenario, I'm still having a hard part figuring out how they were able to track her scent for 2 miles. And basically that means that she was walking on her own power for 2 miles. We don't know if it's down a trail or just through the desert.
I couldn't get a report if there were adult footprints.
Now,
with her footprints, there was tire tracks where the trail ended.
Yeah. I'm assuming if there were adult footprints, that would have been a pretty big...
it would have been mentioned.
They would have been mentioned.
It was
by
a
the family
little girl flip-flops and boots for this amount of time, and then tire tracks pulling away from where they disappeared.
I'm
like that.
gonna go down that route first, just because I don't think this is the likely scenario of what happened to her.
I think tease it out so I can hear it.
Yeah, I still obviously the dogs smelled her scent for 2 miles somewhere through the park,
mm-hmm.
and being that she's 3.5-year-old toddler, prime target for a mountain lion or a coyote. And maybe one possibility is she did wander off, like some people have said, and she waddled down this trail for 2 miles, and a mountain lion or some type of animal out in the park grabbed her, maybe didn't kill her,
carried her off
on the site, but carried her off. I'm assuming a mountain lion's probably strong enough to carry a 3.5-year-old
absolutely.
toddler
I mean, you
away.
think about the things they carry. I mean, they can carry big animals. That would be very easy for a cat to carry off.
And I mean, so maybe, there wasn't any human involvement in this. Maybe it really is a case of she wandered off, a mountain lion, attacked her, and then dragged her away to the mountain lion's den or wherever it lived.
Okay.
And maybe that was outside of the search radius because, maybe the searchers thought, 3.5-year-old kid is not going to be able to walk farther than 2 miles in the hot desert sun.
Well, and they're using helicopters and stuff too. So
helicopters.
You'd be able to see,
and
they're flying.
I'm only saying too, because when we talked to George, he mentioned that when they get flash flooding there, it can wash away all kinds of stuff and move stuff, downstream all over the park. So what I'm thinking, little girl wanders off into the park 2 miles, gets attacked by a mountain lion, dragged to the mountain lion's den, farther away, and then the remains get dispersed during some heavy weather in the park, and that's how the skull was found so far away by a park entrance, is because it was dispersed by, all the flash flooding.
It'd be interesting to do a study of where the skull was found if it is like in a downstream section from another part of the park where they speculate she could have walked. So this is a good theory. I didn't think of this.
And I mean, if you think
this is a really good theory, actually.
You think about a mountain lion maybe attacking someone. I go back to looking at those nature documentaries where they'll go for like the throat.
Sure.
But they're not gonna consume somebody on site, so there might not be a lot of sign of blood or anything right there. I mean, that'll happen later where the mountain lion takes the person to...
Yeah, as disturbing as it is to think about, like,
I know,
it's possible.
This is terrible to think about.
It's terrible to think about, but I think legitimately to hash out what happened, it's possible a mountain lion, she's very tiny,
Yep.
grab her, and they can just run. I mean, like one bite and run, there could be very even little blood. You'd think
that's what I'm
like
thinking.
if it's like
usually
they pounce, grab, and then they run off to a safer spot to actually finish the job. And again, like I'm like
and it could
getting
be,
like gross feelings even imagining something like witnessing that, how disgusting it would be. But yeah, I mean, you think about they can snatch and run, so there might not be blood evidence. Like it could legitimately be she walked and that's where it happened.
Yeah, and it could be outside of the search zone, just because the searchers, they're thinking a 3.5-year-old little girl on foot isn't going to get very far. They're going to search this one probably, couple square miles and, thoroughly.
Sure.
And, who knows? Maybe the mountain lion, like I said, had a den. I don't know where they live, but maybe they went underground and that's why helicopters didn't find any sign of her. I mean, who knows?
Yeah, you would assume they bring them to some kind, because they're going to look for shade.
Yep.
So under a rock, under
tree,
things, and that's where they're hanging out.
And then, like I said earlier, George mentioned that this is very common, and this helps them and sometimes hurts them in search and rescues is when they get their torrential rains and flash flooding in the park. It literally washes everything away.
Yeah.
And sometimes it helps them when they're looking for somebody's remains because it will wash stuff downstream and out into the open, and then they see it. Other times it can just totally disturb the remains of somebody and disperse everything to the point where you may not find anything from them anymore.
Yeah. So the theory in your mind is she's probably under a rock the whole time, and some flooding may have actually kicked out the skull because it's a larger bone. Like it could have actually got picked up by the flow and then moved and then was half buried somewhere, and they thought maybe they weren't thinking at that time like, oh, that's where it happened. Versus, no, this is where the remains ended up.
If we're to believe local law enforcement and that guy is not responsible for her abduction, I would say this would be the most likely cause of her disappearance and death.
Okay.
If you trust law enforcement. Now, I'm not saying, I still believe, even after saying that this could be a mountain lion attack, I still think the fact that she was in a very populated campground and this guy has a known criminal history, like you said, and these two other people were shot dead.
I think your
and dumped in the park. I think maybe this girl was, and the other thing is this girl and her family were frequent visitors to the campground and the park. Maybe this guy.
Oh, so he lives, and I see where you're getting at.
Maybe he's been kind of, following this girl for a while now in this family.
And sick people do that.
They do that. They stalk, and then they figure out a time when they're going to attack and abduct the person. So maybe this guy had been following the family for several weeks or several months.
Well, and it's sad because, you mentioned in the beginning, they're in a cramped apartment, so they frequently visited the park.
Yeah.
So let's believe what they said of Joshua Tree's community is small at that time.
Yeah.
So this guy lives right there. And this big family, which would be noticeable. My family's very noticeable when I come out because we're 8 people.
Yeah.
So if we pull up to a campsite, it's like, holy crap, look at that, look at all those people.
Yeah.
So if they're regularly going there, they probably know a lot of people. Mm-hmm. If it is the small community, everybody knows everybody.
Yeah.
So this guy would be well aware of that family and that little girl and is potentially just waiting for an opportunity. And this is where, honestly, the whole time you're telling me your theory, I'm like, that makes, if there were no other things that happened, that's what happened. Like, that was very convincing to me, except for, like you said, all these other things. She disappeared at the most opportune time possible, which would scream human kidnapping because she's in a populated area. So a mountain lion didn't get her at the bathroom.
I just can't get over that 2-mile track the bloodhounds were on, though. That still, even with the kidnapping, I still can't reconcile that.
Well, and that's where it's like, I'd love to know, did she walk off with the guy?
Yeah.
And they walked for a while first, like, because maybe he was smart enough to know, if I just grab this little kid here, she'll start screaming, everyone's here. So did he I have candy, I coaxed her along.
Yeah, or do you want to come walk with me for a while? Who knows?
Yeah. So, or is it possible the dogs didn't get the scent right? I mean, I don't think that's a high likelihood, but I would say anything's got to be possible at this point. So I think the initial official theory is just garbage. The lost, buried in sand. I think that's garbage.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously it's very easy to see a toddler wandering off into a desert and dying from exposure. That to me is not
I would almost say
outlandish.
Dying of exposure covered by sand over a longer period of time, sure.
Yeah.
But tripped, then buried as a result.
Yeah, I don't understand that explanation
I don't think that's
of it.
I don't think that's it. So then, yeah, you get into, they're interviewing all these people. This guy, everyone there thinks this guy is shady.
Yep.
And then he's not there anymore after this occurs. They question him twice on it. Then, and this is again what throws me off and makes me scream conspiracy, is you have these two witnesses that come forward that claim we have solid evidence. You know, the word stated that I heard that was quoted from them was solid evidence on who kidnapped.
Yeah.
So it wasn't even speculating on who could have, and it might be. It was, we have solid evidence on who kidnapped. So like they knew it.
Yep.
They give testimony. The cops write it off as nothing. Then they get murdered 2 months later.
Yeah.
In the same area. The next time that case is revisited, they basically talk about how it's street talk and these people never actually came forward to the police.
Yeah, I don't understand why they're denying they came forward earlier. That doesn't make sense.
It seemed very well documented that they were interviewed and they came forward with solid evidence because it was reported in the newspaper right when it happened. So you had the newspaper from when they were interviewed and they had spoke to the news about it. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's already above quote-unquote street talk.
Yeah.
It's documented. They spoke to the news, essentially, and said we spoke to authorities, and authorities acknowledged that they spoke to them.
Yeah.
Then those same authorities only a few years later said they never spoke to them.
Yeah, that's bizarre. The only thing I can think of is whoever they talked to maybe wasn't familiar with the case and just didn't know what he was talking about.
Yeah.
Why would you deny that? I mean...
Or say something publicly and not know it for certain.
Yeah.
So,
well, it definitely seems that at the time, local law enforcement kind of bungled the investigation. I mean, there seems to be a lot of dots you can connect, and they weren't connecting them. Now, I mean, I don't understand that, this description of the guy was in the van, at the time of her disappearance. Multiple people described the same type of, guy. I think we can definitely say that the local police at this time kind of fumbled the investigation a bit.
And I think that's where you're getting to Mike thought that they were incompetent.
There's a lot of dots. I think
he was saying that relatively quickly after they started things. Yeah. So maybe he was seeing things that were like, what the heck's going on here?
There's a lot of dots you can connect, and they weren't connecting them. And then you have the case of the wrong skull being shown to them later on.
Yeah. So again, they have
just incompetence? They grabbed the wrong skull out of evidence.
Well, and they talk about how he was trying to get the remains transferred for a long time, and he's getting stonewalled, which this isn't a major case or like a political figure or something that they're still investigating.
Yeah.
This is a guy who they're kind of done with, as far as they're concerned, they're kind of done with this case. Mm-hmm. And he can't get it transferred for some reason. Yeah. So you have, this is only a short period of time. I mean, this was 38 years ago.
Yep.
You probably have the same people working at the department that were involved in there. Are they stonewalling this stuff because they know they lost a skull? Or again, there's speculation that he, like I said, and this is where it's a weird, either obsessed father or intuition. Yeah. One of his first things was he thought someone in the department was covering it up because they knew the kidnapper. So is it possible that they found the skull? Yeah. The skull was placed near the entrance as a way to bring closure, because the sheriff's deputy immediately speculated, yep, this is her. Yeah. But DNA couldn't prove it. So you have maybe they're hoping the father and mother just accept it and now it's closure. They said, no, now you get to a point in period of time where you can do DNA testing. Yeah. And there's a verification of some sort. It seems like there's some confusion around how the tests were run. Mm-hmm. He's shown pictures only. He can't see the skull. And he says immediately it's different. Yeah. So is this evidence tampering now because there truly is a cover-up and the officer involved in the case actually is doing something and these parents will not let it go. And he has to keep slowly stepping, covering his tracks as they go through this and as they keep demanding the skull get released and things like that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess as far as the investigation goes, I kind of lean maybe less conspiracy and more just incompetence. Okay. I think maybe they just ran a poor investigation and they, the incompetence.
Do you think maybe it was incompetence cover-up?
Maybe they were trying to cover up, a bad image. I just can't think of a motivation to, shield somebody that killed a child from, being brought to justice. I just can't picture any law enforcement going that far. I mean, maybe there's a reason why. I
couldn't find any like familial connection to this Alan and anyone in the department, because that's the only thing I could initially think of was maybe it's like a cousin.
The only thing I could think of is, like some Training Day movie kind of plot where they have some type of, drug ring going on, and this guy makes him a lot of money, so they don't want him to go to jail. They want to keep him in place so they can, keep
I didn't think about that. If he's a known criminal and he's running some sort of enterprise, I think
that's
there,
going down, there's absolutely no evidence of.
There's no evidence, but I don't think it's also it's not impossible. No, it has happened.
Not impossible. I think for me, the two most likely scenarios are the first one I said, where maybe she really did wander off because the bloodhounds did track her for 2 miles and she got attacked by a mountain lion. The mountain lion dragged her off, quite a ways away out of the search zone. And then over the course of the next year, a lot of the torrential rains and flash floods, they get washed, one of the bigger pieces of her remains, out by the entrance to the park where it was found. Mm-hmm. I think that's a possibility. I think maybe the second possibility, like we said, is this guy kind of followed the family for a while and was planning to abduct this girl. He abducted her, and then, the investigation that ensued was just, bungled, and, the people involved were just incompetent, and they didn't do all the basic, connecting the dots. They interviewed people, and, we had those
like
two
small town sheriff's department just not
they're not
equipped to handle this style. This was the magnitude of this case,
murder investigation that they've ever had, and maybe they, who knows?
That wasn't like a clear cut, like something that just had a lot
of detective work.
Yeah, like it has a lot of questions, and it's not like, oh, their boyfriend and girlfriend were fighting, girlfriend found dead, boyfriend ran away.
I mean, if I'm an investigator and multiple people say this guy who lives in the campground area, drives a van, was at the scene when the girl went missing, 2 acquaintances that he knew had said, yeah, we know, some information, then they show up dead, I would be probably arresting him. I mean, that's
the biggest thing too. I could not read anywhere what their description was of the person who they said did it.
Yeah.
So everything I found in newspapers and the reports I found were that they had solid evidence on who did it, but I couldn't find the information on what they said or who did it anywhere.
Well, and so these 2 people that were killed were also dumped in the park where he lives. So, I mean...
Yeah, like within the air. I mean...
If I was an investigator, I think I'd have enough, circumstantial evidence...
Yeah.
To maybe bring him in on the charge of maybe possibly abducting and killing this
motive
girl.
If their testimony described him.
Yeah.
So to not have them actually speak in court.
I think maybe the investigation totally screwed up this aspect of it. And then when the family tried to get the skull, I think it was probably more incompetence. They literally showed them the wrong skull. Or maybe the skull from the child was destroyed. Who knows?
Or in the morgue, they have a bunch of skulls from different things.
Maybe they have a bunch of stuff.
The wrong one.
Yeah, who knows? I mean,
that could be possible too. If they're not cataloging evidence very well.
Yeah, and this is back in the 80s. I mean, no.
Yeah, they don't have computers. It's all files.
It's all files, and so I could easily see that happening. So I don't know. I'm more that I'm thinking about. I'm kind of 40-60, 40% mountain lion, 60% abduction by this creepy dude.
Okay, so you're 40-60, natural causes, 60 kidnapping, murder,
incompetent investigation.
Okay. I'm with you. I'm going to say 3. I love your mountain lion theory. And if it wasn't for the other stuff, I'd just say that's it. Something like that occurred. Mm. The one, I'd say there's 2 possibilities. The one you just described, and then the second one would be some sort of...
More of a cover-up.
Just because, again, you have the rule of 3s where just things don't work out.
Yeah.
But it just seemed like a ton of very well-placed incompetence.
Yeah.
And that could also be because we're looking at this thing under a microscope of just this one case. Mm-hmm. If we looked at other, like, is this incompetence rampant in everything they do?
History of incompetence.
Yeah, like if we looked at every case they've ever did, is it very clear that they're incompetent, but other cases are easier and they just work out? Or is this one specifically more incompetence than all the others? Which would then, again, I lean more towards the conspiracy side.
Yeah, and I think we have to also obviously say that maybe truly there's more evidence that we're not seeing, and the law enforcement officers at the time really came to the conclusion that this guy wasn't involved. I mean, that is technically a possibility too. And
see, but the other officers were investigating serial murders of women around San Diego. So they were not focused on these two witness murders or Laura specifically.
Yeah.
Because when it came back to talking about then, in enters the same sheriff that dealt with it originally.
Yeah.
So you have this guy's name popping up for several years, revolving around this, like he's inserting himself in this investigation specifically.
Yeah.
So, so I think we have good, solid theories. Do you think? I'd finish it with: do you think that one of the skulls was Laura's? Like, do you think that was her skull?
I think the original skull found was
so she
hers.
was deceased as a kid. She's not like an adult somewhere.
I don't think so.
Locked up.
I think it's very coincidental that this little girl goes missing in the park, and then a year later they find her skull.
Yeah, a human child skull, and it's not
in
hers.
A park. I mean, it's a big deal when children go missing and are killed. And the fact that there were no other disappearances in that area of a child.
Even in the newspaper clippings, you'd say if they were speculating, they could be like, well, there were 2 other kids that went missing in this area too. It could be one of them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
but they
like,
never mentioned
we found a small child skull.
Yeah.
This is the only child that's been missing. This has got to be it. And then DNA tests later proved it was.
Yep.
And then did they just show the father the wrong file?
Yeah.
When they had the pictures.
That, yeah.
So I think I'm with you on that one. I think she unfortunately did not make it. Fortunately, she's not being tortured somewhere and she's 38 years old and locked in a basement, or maybe didn't suffer very long. I mean, it's again morbid, but you hope that the suffering was very short-lived.
Is the guy in the van still alive?
I didn't check. This is my bad.
Yeah, no, I'm assuming he was probably in his 30s,
because I was
40s
even looking up information on the officer, and I didn't have enough information to dive in because I was searching his name.
Yeah.
And there was recently stories of corruption in the department with somebody with the same name, if it's not the same guy, about like faking training records and hours to get money.
Oh.
So I would love to see if that's
the same time.
No, like in the last 3 years.
Oh, really?
Because you have to admit, this guy.
So he's still a sheriff.
Potentially. I was searching for a while to see if I could connect that this is the same last name, or if it's maybe a descendant of them. But I mean, you have officers that work at a department for 50 years.
Yeah.
And they work their way up. This is a recent in regards of this is one generation potentially of officer. So if this guy's doing this stuff too and they're catching him, maybe he is a crooked sheriff potentially. Did not confirm that it's the same last name, same first name. I'd say 90% certain it's the same guy.
But we don't know.
I can't 100% confirm, so I'm not going to say it, even though I kind of just said it. No, but you can look it up on your own. Yeah, look it up on your own. But yeah, they're going through court right now, court hearings on some form of corruption charges right now, and he's got the same name, and he's in the same area, same police department. So I'm like, what are the odds?
Yeah.
So it's probably him. Just couldn't definitively connect the two. So that again, because what I basically did was I want to find out the character of this officer to find out if he is more of a corrupt guy, and that's immediately what popped up were these other charges in court cases. So
yeah.
I'm
assuming
leaning
he's no longer an active cop.
He was consulting.
Oh, okay.
So the person was of an age that you could argue fits the timeline, and he wasn't employed full-time on the department. He's retired and consulting. So a lot of times those guys will come back for training purposes and do classes.
Yeah.
When I went through Fire Academy, it was a bunch of retired firefighters that taught all those courses. Yeah, I'm leaning more towards... I honestly am leaning more towards some sort of cover-up.
You're going the cover-up route?
I am, and I like to think I'm a more reasonable person and wouldn't lean that way, but like I think there's...
It's okay, you can do it once in a while.
I know, I just think there's so much here that's screaming conspiracy cover-up.
Yeah.
I just can't connect the two guys. And I think that's the biggest thing is if there was one more piece that somehow connected Alan and the sheriff, it would be in my mind 100% that thing. Mm. So that's the one. And I looked for days. Yeah. I was Google searching those two names. I was doing a ton of different things to try and see if they pop up anywhere other than just articles discussing this case. Yeah. And I couldn't find it. So, I mean, there's not a lot of data available from that case. Time. Yeah. I mean, it could be. So, I mean, I am still speculating, but I am leaning towards conspiracy cover-up.
Well, yeah, that's interesting. I guess, like I said, I'm, 60-40, 60 abduction by the creepy guy in the van, and then bungled police investigation, 40% mountain lion attack. But yeah, I think the case is kind of, you don't know one way or the other after going through it what, really happened.